The bus was almost full that bright afternoon when I finally found an empty seat near the window. Sunlight spilled through the glass, warming my arms as I settled in with my headphones and backpack. The ride home was supposed to be peaceful until she showed up. A woman in her mid-40s, dressed sharply with sunglasses perched high on her head, marched down the aisle like she owned the place. Her expression screamed entitlement. She stopped beside me, her lips curling into a smirk that made my stomach twist. "That's my seat," she said loudly, her voice slicing through the quiet chatter. I blinked, confused. Bus seats weren't assigned. Everyone knew that. "Excuse me?" I asked, trying to stay calm. She folded her arms. "You don't look like someone who needs that seat. Let me sit there." The other passengers turned, some frowning, others whispering. My heart pounded not from fear, but disbelief. Was she serious? "Ma'am," I replied carefully, "this seat isn't reserved. I got here first." Her voice rose. "You kids think you're entitled. Get up before I call the driver." The bus driver's mirror tilted toward us, his eyes sharp. A mother hushed her child. Someone in the back muttered, "Not again." And then, something unexpected happened. One by one, the passengers began speaking up, not for her, but for me. A wave of unity I never expected formed right there on that sunlit bus. Karen had no idea that her arrogance was about to backfire in front of everyone. What happened next would teach her and everyone watching that respect isn't demanded by age or appearance. It's earned through kindness. The city was alive that afternoon, buzzing with the sounds of daily chaos, vendors shouting, car horns blaring, and the distant chatter of pedestrians weaving through traffic. The sun hung high, spilling gold over glass buildings and turning the streets into a shimmering sea of light. I had just finished a long, exhausting morning shift at the bookstore where I worked part-time, and my legs felt like lead as I climbed the steps onto the bus. The air inside was warm, thick with the smell of diesel and the faint scent of someone's floral perfume. The driver nodded as I tapped my card on the machine, its beep echoing through the narrow aisle. I scanned the rows, looking for a seat. Most were already taken, mothers with their children, tired office workers, and a few students glued to their phones. Then I spotted it, a single empty seat by the window near the middle. I moved quickly before anyone else could claim it. Dropping my bag to the floor, I sank into the seat with a soft sigh of relief. The bus jolted forward, and sunlight poured through the glass, warming my arm and shoulder. Outside, people hurried along the sidewalks, their shadows long and sharp against the pavement. It was a good day. The kind of afternoon where you could almost forget your worries for a little while. I put in my earbuds and scrolled through my playlist, settling on something calm. As the city blurred past, my thoughts drifted bills, work, and whether I'd have enough energy to cook dinner later. It wasn't an exciting life, but it was peaceful. Or at least it was, until the bus pulled up to the next stop. The door hissed open with a rush of air, and several passengers climbed aboard. Among them was a woman who immediately drew everyone's attention without saying a word. She looked to be in her mid-40s, dressed in a crisp white blouse tucked into a beige skirt, the kind of outfit that screamed money and confidence. A large designer handbag hung from her shoulder, and oversized sunglasses perched on her head like a crown. From the moment she stepped onto the bus, her expression suggested that she wasn't used to public transportation. She looked around the crowded interior with thinly veiled disgust, as if the seats themselves might stain her clothes. Her eyes flicked over each person, assessing, judging until they landed on me. For a second, our gazes met. Her lips curled into a tight, condescending smile before she started down the aisle. Her heels clicked against the floor, sharp and deliberate, and I could feel people shift uncomfortably as she passed. She stopped beside me, her shadow falling across my lap. "That's my seat," she said flatly. I pulled out one earbud, unsure I'd heard her correctly. "I'm sorry." She gestured toward my window seat with a manicured hand. "You're sitting in my spot. I like to sit there every time I take this bus." Her tone wasn't a request, it was a command. My confusion deepened. Bus seats weren't assigned. There were no spots claimed by anyone. Still, I tried to be polite. "I didn't know seats were reserved," I said, forcing a small smile. "I just sat where it was open." Her eyebrows lifted in disbelief. "Reserved?" "No, but I always sit there. It's my seat." "So, you need to move?" A few people nearby looked up, sensing the tension. The hum of the bus quieted just slightly. I could feel the heat of their stares, waiting to see how I'd respond. My first instinct was to avoid conflict. Just get up, find another seat, and let it go. But then I looked around. Every other seat was taken, except one near the back where the sun blazed directly through the window. I was tired, and I'd done nothing wrong. "I'm sorry," I said gently, "but I really don't want to move. I was here first." Her smile vanished. She straightened, folding her arms across her chest. "Excuse me, are you seriously refusing?" Her voice carried sharp enough to draw attention from people several rows away. I swallowed, my heart beating faster now. "Ma'am, it's just a seat. There are others." "No," she snapped. "You don't understand. I always sit there. You don't look like you need it." That line hit me like a slap. Didn't look like I needed it. What was that supposed to mean? Her tone dripped with superiority. as if my cheap clothes or tired face somehow made me less deserving of comfort. A man across the aisle frowned. "Lady, there's no assigned seating," he muttered. She turned on him with a glare. "I wasn't talking to you." The driver glanced up in his mirror, his eyes narrowing. The whole bus seemed to hold its breath. I could feel my cheeks heating, partly from embarrassment, partly from anger. I had always avoided confrontations. They made my stomach twist and my palms sweat. But something about the way she looked at me, like I was beneath her, made it impossible to back down. "I'm not moving," I said firmly. Her mouth fell open. "What did you just say?" "You heard me," I replied. "This isn't your seat. I got here first." Her voice rose even higher. "Unbelievable. Kids today have no respect. When I tell you to move, you move. Do you even know who I am?" Someone in the back chuckled under their breath. A woman holding a toddler rolled her eyes. "We don't care who you are," she muttered. Karen. I didn't know her name yet, but she fit the title perfectly, looked around as if expecting support. Instead, she found only disapproving stares. The driver cleared his throat. "Ma'am," he said over the intercom, "please take any available seat. We have to keep moving." But she wasn't ready to back down. "Driver, this young person is being rude," I asked nicely, "and they're refusing. I should report this." The driver sighed. "Ma'am, everyone here has paid the same fare. Please, just find a seat." Her lips tightened. For a moment, I thought she might actually explode. Instead, she took a deep breath and leaned closer to me, her voice low but venomous. "You think you're brave now, but people like you never last. Enjoy your little seat." She stepped back, still glaring, and moved to stand by the front of the bus, muttering something under her breath about disrespectful youth. The tension slowly melted from the air. The man across the aisle shook his head, whispering, "Some people just love drama." I smiled faintly, pretending to look out the window, though my hands were still trembling. The bus rolled forward again, the city passing by in streaks of light and color. Outside, the world continued as if nothing had happened, but inside, something had shifted. I realized how easily people like her tried to take what wasn't theirs, using tone and status like weapons. But I also learned something else, that standing your ground, even quietly, could feel stronger than shouting. The sun glowed brighter now, reflecting off nearby buildings. I took a deep breath and leaned back in my seat, the hum of the engine steady beneath me. I didn't know it then, but this was only the beginning of a ride I'd never forget. The bus rattled along the crowded city streets, sunlight glinting off passing cars as the air grew thick with tension. Though the scene from earlier had quieted down, I could still feel the echo of that woman's words buzzing in my head. Her glare had burned holes in the back of my seat as she stood near the front, refusing to sit even though there were open spots available. It was as if she wanted everyone to see her anger, to make a point that she had been wronged. The bus jolted as it hit a bump, and the woman, Karen, as I had silently decided to call her, grabbed the nearest pole for balance. She muttered something under her breath, loud enough for several passengers to hear. Something about people with no manners these days. I pretended to look out the window, but I could see her reflection in the glass, her tight lips, her eyes darting toward me every few seconds. A few minutes passed in tense silence. The hum of the engine and the faint squeak of the brakes were the only sounds that filled the air. I thought maybe the whole thing would just fade away, that she'd let it go, sit down, and we'd all move on. But people like Karen didn't let things go. They thrived on attention, on control, and when they didn't get it, they found ways to stir the pot again. At the next red light, she turned abruptly and began walking back toward me. Her heels clacked sharply against the bus floor, echoing like warning shots. A few heads turned. My heart sank. Not again. She stopped right beside me, crossing her arms. "You're still sitting there," she said coldly. I looked up slowly, trying to keep my voice calm. "Yes, I told you before. This seat isn't reserved. I'm not moving." She let out a bitter laugh. "Unbelievable. I thought maybe you'd realize your mistake by now." I blinked, genuinely confused. "My mistake?" "Yes," she said, leaning closer, her perfume flooding my senses. "Do you know how long I've been taking this route? Every weekday for the last 4 years. Everyone here knows that this seat, that exact seat, is where I sit. People respect that. Until today." A man sitting across the aisle lowered his newspaper. "Ma'am," he said, his tone edged with irritation, "this isn't your living room. It's public transport." Karen shot him a glare sharp enough to cut glass. "I wasn't talking to you," she snapped. Then she turned back to me, narrowing her eyes. "You see, this is the problem with your generation. No manners, no respect. You think the world owes you something just because you're young." Her voice was loud enough for everyone to hear now. I could feel the weight of a dozen pairs of eyes watching us. My palms were sweating, but I kept my tone steady. "Ma'am, I'm just sitting, that's all. You don't know anything about me." "Oh, I know enough," she said. "You're one of those lazy types, the ones who take up space and give attitude. I can see it." That stung more than I expected. Not because her words were true, but because she said them with such certainty, as if my worth could be summed up in a single glance. Before I could respond, an older man from the back spoke up. "Lady, sit down before you embarrass yourself even more." The bus erupted with murmurs. Karen turned, her face reddening. "Excuse me, I'm not embarrassing myself, I'm standing up for respect." The driver's voice crackled through the intercom. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to either take a seat or stop disturbing other passengers." "I am not disturbing anyone," she shouted, pointing toward me. "They're the one who started this. They took my seat and now everyone's ganging up on me." A young woman with headphones pulled one earbud out. "Lady, you need to chill. It's just a seat. Nobody cares where you sit." Karen's mouth dropped open in disbelief. "You people are unbelievable. Back in my day, back in your day," someone interrupted, "people probably minded their own business." The bus rippled with quiet laughter. Even I couldn't stop a small smile from creeping across my face. But that smile seemed to fuel her rage even more. "Oh, you think this is funny, do you?" she hissed, stepping closer. "Do you think you can humiliate me in front of everyone?" I met her glare. My voice came out firmer than I felt. "No one's trying to humiliate you. You're doing that to yourself." Her face twisted with fury. "You little ma'am," the driver called out sharply, cutting her off. "That's enough. If you can't calm down, I'll have to stop the bus and call someone." Karen froze. The bus fell silent again. You could hear the soft hum of the tires on the asphalt and the faint rustle of someone turning a page. Her chest rose and fell quickly, her hands trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the shock of being challenged. She looked around, as if expecting support, but all she found were tired, unimpressed faces. Even the mother with a toddler, who had been quietly rocking her child, shook her head in disapproval. For the first time since she boarded, Karen seemed uncertain. The fire in her voice dimmed to a low simmer. "Fine," she muttered. "I'll sit. But this isn't over." She stomped toward an empty seat near the front and dropped into it, her handbag landing beside her with a thud. The bus driver gave a long sigh and focused back on the road as the vehicle rumbled forward again. I leaned my head back against the window, exhaling slowly. My heart was still pounding from the confrontation, but relief began to seep in. The warm sunlight streamed across my lap, and for a moment, it felt like the bus had exhaled with me, the tension fading, the mood returning to normal. The man across from me caught my eye and gave a small nod of approval. "Good job, kid," he said quietly. "Some people just need to be told no." I smiled faintly. I wasn't trying to fight her. "I know," he replied, "but sometimes standing your ground is the only way to stop people like that." The rest of the ride passed in uneasy quiet. Karen kept her back rigid, staring straight ahead, her reflection visible in the front window. Every so often she'd glance my way, her lips pressed into a thin, bitter line, but she didn't say another word outside. The world carried on, cyclists gliding past, sunlight shimmering off puddles from an earlier wash of street cleaners, and shopkeepers propping open their doors. Inside the bus, though, the air felt heavier, like everyone was still processing what had just happened. As the bus neared my stop, I gathered my bag and stood up. I could feel Karen's eyes following me. For a moment, I almost expected her to say something, an insult, a sarcastic comment, anything. But she stayed silent, her hands clutching her handbag tightly when I stepped off the bus. The bright sunlight hit me full in the face. I took a deep breath, feeling the warmth on my skin. The city noise washed over me, car horns, laughter, the distant cry of a street vendor. For the first time that day, I felt strangely lighter. Little did I know, the story wasn't finished. Because sometimes, people like Karen don't just disappear quietly. Sometimes, their pride forces them to come back for round two, and I was about to find out just how far she was willing to go. The next afternoon was warm and bright, the kind of day that made the whole city glow. The sunlight shimmered across the pavement, and the smell of freshly baked bread drifted from the bakery near the bus stop. I had finished my shift at the bookstore again, exhausted but in good spirits. The incident from yesterday still lingered in my mind, but I had decided to move on. People like Karen were just part of city life, loud, entitled, and best forgotten. As I approached the bus stop, I noticed a few familiar faces from the day before. The same elderly man who defended me sat on the bench, his cap pulled low. A woman with a shopping bag smiled politely as I joined the small line forming near the curb. Everything felt calm, normal. The bus rumbled into view, its brakes squealing slightly as it came to a stop. I climbed aboard, greeted the driver and made my way toward the middle again. The window seat, the same one from yesterday, was empty. I hesitated for a second, then smiled to myself and sat down. The sunlight bathed the seat in warmth. I slipped in my earbuds, pressed play on a soft tune, and rested my head against the glass. The bus filled quickly, and soon the aisle was crowded with people clutching bags and backpacks. The driver closed the doors with a hiss, and we rolled forward into the golden afternoon traffic. I was half lost in my music when I heard a familiar voice, sharp, confident, and unmistakably condescending. "Well, isn't this a surprise?" My stomach tightened. I turned slowly, and there she was, Karen Dodd. She stood a few rows back, dressed just as perfectly as before, sunglasses perched on her head, lips painted in bold red. Her eyes locked onto me with that same look of irritation, as if she'd been waiting for this moment. "You again," she said, folding her arms. "Sitting in my seat. Again?" I couldn't help but sigh quietly. Ma'am, this isn't your seat. We went through this yesterday. Her expression hardened. You think you can just disrespect me and get away with it? A few passengers exchanged glances. Someone groaned quietly under their breath, already anticipating the drama. The bus driver looked back in the mirror but didn't intervene. Not yet. I didn't disrespect you, I said calmly. I just sat down where it was open. Karen took a step closer, gripping the metal rail beside me. You're mocking me, aren't you? You think this is funny? You think you can make me look foolish again like yesterday? Karen, please, a voice from the front called out. It was the same man who'd defended me before. Not this again. Let it go. Her head snapped toward him. Don't tell me what to do, she barked. You people think you can gang up on me. I won't be disrespected by children and strangers. Lady, you're the only one yelling. Someone muttered from the back. Her eyes widened, her anger swelling. This is unbelievable. Where's the driver? I want this person removed. The driver's voice came over the intercom, weary but firm. Ma'am, if you cause another disturbance, I'll have to stop the bus again. Please, just sit down. But Karen didn't move. Her face was red now, her voice trembling with fury. You're all against me. You don't know what I've been through. I deserve respect. The tension on the bus thickened like fog. I could feel my pulse racing, but this time, I wasn't scared. I was tired of being polite, tired of feeling small. I took out my earbuds and met her gaze. Respect isn't something you demand, I said, my voice steady but quiet enough to make her lean in. It's something you earn, and shouting at strangers isn't how you earn it. The words seemed to hang in the air. For a moment, no one spoke. Then, from somewhere in the back, someone clapped. It was soft at first, hesitant, but then another joined in, and another. Within seconds, the bus filled with the sound of clapping, not loud or mocking, but calm, steady, united. Karen froze. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. She looked around, her eyes darting from face to face, as if hoping someone, anyone, would be on her side. But all she saw were people shaking their heads. See, the man in the cab said gently. Nobody's against you. We're just tired of you treating people badly. For the first time since I'd seen her, Karen didn't have a comeback. Her expression softened, not with understanding but confusion, maybe even disbelief, like she couldn't process the idea that she might be wrong. The driver slowed the bus at a red light, then turned slightly in his seat. Ma'am, there's a spot right near the door. Please sit down so we can keep moving. Karen didn't respond at first. Her hands trembled slightly as she clutched her bag. I thought she might lash out again, but instead, she turned abruptly, her heels clicking sharply against the floor as she walked to the front. She dropped into the empty seat by the door without another word. The bus remained silent for a few moments. Then the driver pressed the accelerator and the city began to roll by again. The tension eased, replaced by quiet murmurs and a few chuckles. Good for you, the woman beside me said with a small smile. You handled that better than most people would. Thanks, I said softly. I just didn't want it to turn into a fight. She nodded. You didn't, you ended it. I looked out the window, the sunlight painting the buildings in warm tones of orange and gold. I should have felt triumphant, but instead, I felt sad. Sad that someone like Karen could carry so much bitterness. It's sad that something as simple as a bus seat could bring out such ugliness in people still. As the bus continued through the bright streets, I realized something had changed. Yesterday, I had been a nervous passenger caught in someone else's storm. Today, I had faced that storm, and it hadn't drowned me when the bus reached my stop. I stood up, slinging my bag over my shoulder. As I stepped down onto the pavement, I caught a glimpse of Karen through the window. She wasn't shouting anymore. She was just staring out at the city, her face unreadable, her eyes distant. Maybe she was embarrassed. Maybe she was thinking, or maybe she was just plotting her next move. I didn't know, but for the first time, she looked less like a villain and more like a lonely person who didn't know how to be kind anymore. The bus pulled away, disappearing into the stream of traffic. The afternoon breeze brushed against my face as I began the walk home. Birds chirped in the trees overhead, and the sound of children playing drifted from a nearby park. I took a deep breath and smiled faintly. Life was strange, unpredictable, but somehow, in the middle of that crowded bus, surrounded by strangers, I had learned something important. Standing your ground isn't always about pride. Sometimes it's about reminding yourself and others that dignity doesn't come from power. It comes from respect, earned one quiet act of courage at a time. The next day dawned clear and bright, sunlight streaming across the streets like liquid gold. I woke up feeling lighter, almost relieved that the drama of the past 2 days might finally be behind me. I had no idea whether Karen would even be on the bus again, but part of me hoped she wouldn't. I was tired of confrontation. I just wanted peace. By the time I reached the bus stop, the usual small crowd had gathered, office workers tapping on their phones, an elderly couple holding hands, and the same man with the gray cap who had stood up for me before. He gave me a friendly nod, and I smiled back. Hopefully today's quieter, he said with a chuckle. Yeah, I replied, laughing softly. Let's hope our drama queen found another route. The bus arrived with a soft rumble, its doors opening to release a burst of cool air. I climbed aboard, scanning for an empty seat. My window spot that seat was already taken by a teenage girl with earbuds in, nodding to music. I smiled, oddly relieved. Maybe this was a sign that things could go back to normal. I found a seat 2 rows back and settled in. The sunlight poured through the window, painting the aisle with streaks of gold. The city rolled by, peaceful and alive. I allowed myself to relax, scrolling through my phone. Everything felt calm again until the bus stopped at the next intersection. When the door opened, I heard that voice. "Excuse me, driver." My stomach clenched instantly. I didn't even need to look up. I knew that voice too well. Karen had returned. She climbed aboard with her usual air of superiority, her heels clacking sharply against the metal floor. Her sunglasses gleamed under the sunlight, and her lips were pursed into a thin, determined line. The passengers who recognized her exchanged uneasy glances. You could almost feel the tension ripple through the air. The driver's voice was calm but firm. "Good afternoon, ma'am. Please find a seat quickly. We're on schedule." "Oh, don't worry," she said coolly. "I'm not here to cause trouble." The words sounded innocent enough, but her tone carried that same simmering arrogance. She scanned the rows of seats and then froze. Her precious window seat was taken. I watched from a few rows back as her face darkened. The teenage girl sitting there looked up confused. Karen marched down the aisle, her heels striking the floor with purpose. "That's my seat," she said. The girl blinked. "Huh," Karen sighed dramatically. "I always sit there. Every day. Ask anyone." The girl frowned. "Sorry, lady, but I don't see your name on it." A few passengers stifled laughter. The man in the gray cap groaned softly, rubbing his forehead. "Here we go again," he muttered. The driver's voice came over the intercom, this time with less patience. "Ma'am, I warned you yesterday. No seat is reserved. Please stop disturbing the ride." Karen whipped around, her eyes blazing. "I'm not disturbing anyone. I just want my seat." "That's not your seat," I said before I could stop myself. Her head turned sharply, and when she saw me, her expression hardened. "Of course you're here," she sneered. "Still trying to make me look like the bad guy, huh?" "I'm not trying to do anything," I replied calmly. "I'm just sitting quietly, like everyone else." She let out a bitter laugh. "Oh, you love playing the victim, don't you? First you steal my seat, then you turn the whole bus against me. Well, not this time." The girl in the window seat removed one earbud. "Lady, I don't even know who you are. Can you chill?" Karen glared at her. "Don't talk to me like that." "Then don't talk to me like that," the girl snapped back. The entire bus was silent, waiting. The driver sighed audibly through the intercom. "Ma'am, I won't say it again. Sit down or I'll have to stop the bus." Karen hesitated. You could see the war playing out on her face. Pride versus reason. She looked around, hoping someone would defend her. But every face she met looked away. Even the older woman who usually rode near the front gave her a cold stare. Then, from somewhere in the back, a voice called out, "Why does it matter so much? It's just a seat." Another voice added, "Yeah, we're all tired of this drama." Karen froze, her eyes darting between the passengers. The murmurs grew louder, voices overlapping, firm but not cruel. "Every day. It's the same thing. She thinks she's better than everyone else. Just sit down already." The sound filled the bus, not angry shouting, but a chorus of weary frustration. For the first time, Karen looked small. Her confidence cracked, her shoulders sagging slightly. I just, she stammered, her voice trembling. "It's my routine. I always sit there. It makes me feel safe." The sudden vulnerability in her voice caught everyone off guard. The bus quieted. The driver spoke gently this time. "Ma'am, no one's trying to take anything from you. But you can't keep yelling at people. That's not fair to them or to yourself." Karen stood there for a long moment, gripping the pole tightly. Her expression softened, her voice barely a whisper. "I don't like change." The teenage girl, still sitting in the window seat, hesitated. Then she stood up. "You can sit here if it's that big a deal," she said quietly. Karen looked surprised, then ashamed. No, I shouldn't. I've been rude to everyone." The bus driver nodded approvingly. "That's a good start, ma'am. Just find a seat and let's keep going." Karen exhaled slowly, her anger finally fading into something else, maybe regret, maybe embarrassment. She sat down across from me, near the aisle, keeping her eyes fixed on the floor. For a few minutes, the only sounds were the hum of the engine and the city passing by. Then the man in the gray cap leaned toward her slightly. "You know," he said gently, "respect goes both ways. Nobody here wanted to fight you. We just wanted a quiet ride." Karen nodded slowly, still not meeting his eyes. "I know," she whispered. "I just thought people didn't care anymore. I didn't realize I was the one being difficult." I watched her silently, unsure what to say. Part of me still felt angry about the way she'd treated me. But another part, a smaller, quieter part, felt sorry for her sometimes. People like Karen weren't cruel because they wanted to be. They were just lost, stuck in their pride, unable to admit when they were wrong until the world forced them to face it. When my stop came, I stood up. As I passed her seat, she looked up for the first time. Her eyes met mine, and to my surprise, she spoke. "I'm sorry," she said softly. I paused, studying her face. The arrogance was gone. She looked human. "It's okay," I replied gently. "We all have bad days." A faint smile crossed her lips, maybe more than a few. The doors opened, and I stepped out into the bright afternoon sun. The city bustled as always. But something about the day felt lighter, as if a small corner of the world had shifted toward kindness. Behind me, the bus pulled away, carrying Karen and a group of passengers who had just witnessed something rare, not just an argument, but a moment of humility, of learning. And as I walked home under the glowing sky, I realized that sometimes, even the loudest people need to be heard, not to be agreed with, but to be reminded that respect is a two-way street. The morning after the bus incident felt different. The city looked the same, cars weaving through traffic, vendors shouting over each other, sunlight reflecting off the glass windows of tall buildings, but I felt something had changed inside me. It wasn't just relief, it was a quiet sense of peace. Over the past few days, what began as a simple argument over a seat had turned into something far bigger, a lesson about pride, empathy, and how strangers can come together when respect is at stake. I stepped out of my apartment and walked toward the bus stop, not sure if I'd see Karen again. A small part of me hoped I would, not for another confrontation but for closure. The air was crisp and clean, and the sky was painted in a soft shade of blue. The city seemed calm, and for once, so was I when the bus finally pulled up. I climbed aboard, greeted the driver with a nod, and scanned for a seat. The same window seat, our infamous seat, was empty again. I hesitated for a moment, then smiled and sat down. The memory of that chaotic afternoon flashed through my mind. Karen yelling, passengers defending me, the clapping, and finally, her quiet apology. A few minutes later, as the bus continued down the busy avenue, I heard the familiar sound of heels clicking against the floor. I looked up, and there she was, Karen. But this time, she was different. Gone were the sunglasses, the stiff posture, and the angry glare. Her expression was softer, her shoulders relaxed. She seemed almost shy as she glanced around before her eyes met mine. "Is this seat taken?" she asked gently, motioning to the spot beside me. I smiled. "No, go ahead." She sat down carefully, clutching her handbag in her lap. For a moment, we sat in silence, the hum of the engine filling the space between us. Then she spoke, her voice quieter than I'd ever heard it. "I owe you another apology," she said. "Not just for the seat, but for how I treated you. I was embarrassed, angry at everything, really, and I took it out on you." I nodded slowly. "It's okay. It happens." She looked out the window, sunlight catching in her hair. "You know, I've been riding this bus for years. My husband used to drive me to work before he passed away. After that, I started taking this route every day. Sitting by the window, it made me feel like he was still there with me, like the world hadn't completely changed." Her voice cracked slightly, and I felt my chest tighten. Suddenly, all her anger, her defensiveness, made sense. It wasn't just arrogance. It was grief misplaced, unprocessed, and wrapped in pride. "I'm sorry for assuming the worst," I said quietly. "You didn't deserve to be judged either." Karen smiled faintly. "I did, actually. I needed that wake-up call. Everyone did." She chuckled softly. "The driver told me later that the whole bus was talking about it. I guess I became a bit of a local legend." I laughed, the tension melting away. "Yeah, I think you did. For the first time, we weren't opponents. We were just two people sharing a ride connected by an uncomfortable memory that had somehow turned into understanding." As the bus rolled along the sunlit streets, more passengers boarded. A young mother with her toddler stood near the aisle, struggling to hold both a child and a bag of groceries. Without hesitation, Karen stood up. "Please, take my seat," she said with a warm smile. The mother blinked in surprise. "Oh, thank you." Karen nodded and moved to stand by the door, holding onto the rail. She caught my eye and smiled. This time it wasn't forced or prideful. It was genuine. The man in the gray cap from earlier rides watched the exchange and grinned. "Now that's the Karen we want to see," he said teasingly. The whole bus chuckled, and even Karen laughed. The atmosphere was lighter than it had been in days. People talked, joked, and even exchanged names. It was strange how one person's transformation could change the mood of an entire bus. For the first time, everyone seemed like a community, not just strangers heading in the same direction as the bus continued down the road. I looked out the window. The world outside seemed brighter, friendlier. The chaos of the city didn't feel overwhelming anymore. It felt alive when my stop came. I stood up and slung my bag over my shoulder. Karen turned toward me, her expression thoughtful. "Thank you," she said softly, "for not giving up on me, even when I didn't deserve kindness." I smiled. "You don't have to thank me. You figured it out yourself." She laughed quietly. "Maybe, but it helped having someone show me what respect actually looks like." I nodded, stepping toward the door. "Take care, Karen." "You too," she said, waving as I stepped off the bus. The doors closed with a hiss, and the bus rolled away, blending into the rhythm of the city. I stood there for a moment, watching it disappear down the street, feeling strangely proud, not of winning an argument, but of what had come from it. Because sometimes, change doesn't happen through shouting or anger. Sometimes it happens through small acts of patience, quiet understanding, and standing your ground when it really matters. As I walked home under the afternoon sun, The sounds of the city around me, laughter, car horns, the hum of life felt softer somehow. Kinda, and I realized that respect isn't about age, status, or power. It's about seeing the humanity in someone else, even when they make it hard to see. That day, on a crowded city bus, I learned that the smallest seat can hold the biggest lessons and that even people like Karen can change when given the chance to be heard. The bus taught us all something important. You don't have to fight to earn respect. You just have to give it first. And as I disappeared into the crowd, I knew that whatever came next, I'd carry that lesson with me every time I took a seat, anywhere in life.